And then we went to a screening of Friday Part 2 and Part 3 in 3D. It was a 20-year anniversary, which was 2002. And as a surprise, Larry Zerner was there, and Richard Brooker, they didn't tell him where they're taking him. His friends brought him and surprised him. So there was like 3 or 4 of the cast up there. And I wanted to do another book after the DVD thing, and I was like, oh my God, like it just hit me. I was in the audience going, well, duh, like this would be great. Like I get to write about something that no one's talked about. You know what I mean? It's not, because anyone can write, Jaws and Star Wars. I mean, there's a million, it's already talked about to death. I'm like, this is totally up my alley. Like I love this stuff, and it stuck with me for like 2 months, and every day I'd get up going, yeah, this is like, because a big thing with, I don't know, anything, not just writers, but you probably experience this, like, you have an idea, like, this sounds cool, and then, like, a week later, you don't care anymore.
Yeah.
But, like, a good idea, like, a few weeks later, a few months later, you're still getting up excited as you were when you first thought of it. Then that, because part of the thing with a book or anything, a big project, is you got to see it through for 2 years. So you better have the passion, because, 2 years from now, you're going to have to be working 8 hours a day on this thing still. So, that's why I think a lot of things peter out, so to speak, because, it's hard to keep that level of intense passion for something for that long of a period of time. I didn't know that at the time. And then we laugh about it now, but I thought the book was just going to be like a soft cover. I'm like, I'll do like 20 interviews, 30. And then the big changing point really is I started it. Is 2 things happened. Is Sean Cunningham, I guess it turned out someone else had tried to do a Friday book or a couple times, and they all flaked out. So when I wrote him, he's like, oh yeah, whatever. And he's like, keep in touch. Let me know how your progress is. It took me 8 months to really get him on board after I did a number of interviews. And then concurrent, they announced Freddy vs. Jason was going into was finally going forward. And Sean was amazing once he got on board. He was so supportive. He called New Line, and they're like, oh great. They're like, we're not in the book business, but we'll get you photo. Like suddenly I had access to like real stuff, and that's when the idea, like, well, maybe it could be like, because once I saw these photos, I mean, I got to go to Paramount, and like literally there was boxes in their archives. And we're talking, and people think like everything's pristine in these like fancy vaults, but literally it's like the box is covered in dirt. There was like cardboard boxes stuck, and there was like slides and like pictures. And as a Friday, you can imagine, like, this is before the book or DVDs or anything. It was like there's like shots of like all the cut makeup stuff. Like, there's like Part 5, I'm seeing, Juliet Cummins with Machete coming through her fake, like this stuff has never been seen. Like some of this is like there was a couple of skills from the Part 3 cut ending, and it was like, oh my God, like, and this is really there's websites, but it's not like now where you can, I know it's just different. It's back then the website, you couldn't put big high-res photos. You'd be downloading on your dial-up for 10 minutes. You couldn't really show video on the web like now, because people didn't have high-speed internet.
Yeah.
So there's things like, wow, this like. And then it was like I had that crazy thing of like, well, can I actually make a hardcover? So that was the big switch. Was that's a big difference. A paperback is much cheaper. You're talking about a big hardcover book. Suddenly list price isn't $20, it's $50 or $40. You're talking about $10 a copy just to print and bind 320 full color. You know what I mean? It's a huge hardcover. And then we had to design a cover. You know what I mean? It's totally different. And so that was the crazy thing of like, oh shit, like. But then once you see all that stuff, and then you have that vision, you're like, well, I can't go back to the cheap paperback because I know what this could be.
Right.
So, but then that was like, people were like, well, okay, well, now you're kind of, okay, for book of everything, I can see it, but now, you're kind of on the line of maybe this is going to be a big bust. But again, I went back to the model kits and the conventions, and people are spending all this money for these high priced collectibles, I just believe, because this is the book I wanted since I was a kid, and I figured if I wanted it, all the other fans would want it too. So
definitely,
yeah, it worked out.
Well, how did you attack the project, considering that it seems like such a huge undertaking in tackling a book like this and doing it right?
Yeah, well, again, it started because it started smaller. I thought, okay, it'd be like more of a paperback. With some interviews, and maybe there'd be some black and white photos or one of those little 8-page spreads in the middle. So because it happened in stages, I think if it started where, oh my God, I'm doing this 320-page full color thing, it would have been overwhelming. But because it happened slowly over time, and at first like, well, I did some interviews and Sean took so long, it wasn't that over. It only became overwhelming when I stupidly decided, well, I'm going to lay the book out myself too. I'm going to teach myself. Well, now you have like InDesign, but back then it was called Quark Express, was like the big layout program. So, oh, this will be fun. I'll do it all myself, and I know Photoshop, so I'll color correct all the photos. I went and bought a slide scanner. I literally scanned my own slides in and I made my own website because I was a website designer too. So I totally stupid, and I totally overwhelmed myself. So the last 6 months was not good. It was really unpleasant because then we had a date locked in and we had the party set up, and then it was like a horrifying train that you can't get off. You can't stop it. So I didn't see. It was really bad. I got really run down and sick. Like because this is back then. People forget, like you couldn't upload. Like I literally had to put all the book files on CDs, and then printing was done overseas. So things had to be FedExed. They would send you proofs, which could take 4 or 5 or a week to get to you, so you could go back with changes. So like there was a huge amount of pressure at the end of like you couldn't do things quickly. So like you never estimate. Things always take longer, and you think, okay, and then it was just a nightmare to think. And then computers were slower back then. Like sometimes the Photoshop, like a really big full page color image in the book is like, I forgot, 9 inches by 12 inches, 300 DPI. That's not big now, but for an old computer or laptop in 2004, it couldn't process. So if I do a color correction or fix something, sometimes it would take 45 seconds or a minute just for the image to render or re-render and save. So everything took longer. It was just, it's all coming back to me now. It's going to make me nauseous, but yeah, it was just nerve wracking, It's like when they talk about like the old Toy Story, not old now, but I guess they're old. The original Toy Story movies, like back then rendering was so much slower, so literally like to render all the animation took now you can previs and do everything in 5 seconds on a laptop. It's crazy. What you can do quickly now and just on your phone. You can record 4K video on an iPhone. You couldn't even do that on you couldn't have anything that high res on a laptop back in 2002. Okay. So yeah, it was a lot. I just you don't know when you do it that you've kind of overextended yourself. So that sucked. And then I couldn't stop. You get addicted to interviews. I think I did 200. And at a certain point, you can't interview the caterer. You can't interview every single person. So I totally underestimated them. Or I don't know how. I did. Like now, I realize like I didn't need to do 2-hour interviews with certain cast members because this is not going to get in the book. It's just not. So I ended up with over 1 million words just of transcripts. So when I got all the interviews back, I did them over time. So just imagine reading through 1 million words just to take notes of what you're going to use, because you have to read everything first. So just the act of going through all the interview material before you even put it into shape and marking, that's a huge task. So
wow.
Yeah. So yeah, if I would have known that at the beginning, I probably would have had a heart attack. But but by the time and then I'm like, I'm 2/3 of the way through. I can't quit now.
Well, was there a point toward the end where you thought, oh my God, it's not going to be ready on time? Was there that panic moment?
Oh yeah, that lasted for about literally 4 months. Like, oh my God, and I'm so stupid now. I'm like, why didn't I just ask for more help? Like, why didn't we just spend a few extra bucks and just hire an extra proof, thing, or, I don't know. I don't know. I was younger, or I should have asked for more help. I don't know, but
how much
it came out.
How much help did you have writing the book?
Well, Dan Ferens was amazing. You probably know who he is.
Mm-hmm.
He edited the book for me. He was very helpful. And then Jeff Garrett, he worked for Crystal Lake Entertainment. He helped with the party, getting the people behind the cover, helping with a lot of the production side. But you don't have a big you don't have a whole crew. You don't these are people also have jobs, and again, because I took on the layouts myself, it's sort of like no one else knew how to do it. So by the time you explain to them how to help you, you could just do it yourself. So there were certain things that so I did get some help, but maybe I would have earlier on, well, I would have done shorter interviews. Maybe I'd have done some email interviews. So then you already have it written out. Um, or I would have had someone maybe through this and tell me what are the 5 coolest stories to get some, because when I first started, I was so excited, I mean, you can imagine, being a fan of something like, oh my God, I have this Amy Steele interview. So I'd sit there for 2 hours at the cafe and read her interview and enjoy it. And then at a certain point, like, okay, I don't have time for this. I
Uh-huh.
can't sit, I got to get this shit done. So like, that's when panic sets in, is when it's, the last 6 months, it's like, you are more leisurely at the beginning because you have all this time. Um, and then slowly when it nears the end, you're like, oh shit, I just did 2 new interviews and I don't have 3 hours to go over them. I have to, and then it's not fun when you're rushing. And so, we all know what it's like to panic and feel like you don't have enough time. It's just,
Yeah.
it's a horrible, constant feeling of stress of you're not going to make it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, yeah.
Well, speaking of Amy Steele, who
Hmm.
was at the top of your list of Friday the 13th alumni that you wanted to review? Who was your top five? Did you make a list of the first like 5 or 10 people that you wanted to interview?
Sure. I mean, there was always the main, it's like every director, um, the main producers like Sean Cunningham, Frank Mancuso, and then the final girl. You wanted the main. I mean, even then the list, because there's so many movies. Jason X was around. This is before I started, before Freddy vs. Jason, but still Jason X. That's 11 movies. Right away, just the main people you're talking. 5 per movie. You're like 60 people. I mean, you think about it, only 5 interviews per movie. That's 55 interviews.
Yeah.
Because you want the director, and the thing with Friday the 13th, there's a few people that crossed over, but really not that many. It's not like Freddy Krueger or Wes Craven, who they did a lot of things. Like, Sean, like a lot of people, there was totally new cast and crews for each movie. So, and so yeah, and then so it ended up where I think almost 200 interviews, and then it's so hard because then it's like, well, how do you pick? I mean, so of course, yeah, I mean. Uh, Adrian, Amy Steele, Dana Kimmel, and Kimberly Beck were the ones I really wanted to talk. Because some of the later movies I wasn't as big of a fan of, but it's still the same. You want to give each movie equal weight, so I wanted to make sure, like, if there was a Jason that Goes to Hell fan, that I didn't skimp on that movie and just interview 2 people. So that was the other hard thing, is that if I did have favoritism for the first 4 because they were the ones I grew up on more. So of course I did more interviews for those at first, but it's like, well, crap, now I can't let Jason X fall apart. So I can't just, I ended up having to do, that it just grew and grew, and it was difficult. I'm sorry, I didn't really answer your question. Did I? No.
Well, kinda. But were there any specific people from the movies, like the stars, that were
Yeah, I
like
guess
your
this
top
is like
five?
when I made my list. Yeah,
Yeah.
when I made my list, I realized it was way more than, like, there wasn't just, because there were so many movies, like even just the core people was like 30 people. So like I definitely wanted Sean Cunningham, all the directors. I'm like, it's really hard to do something like this if you can't talk to the director.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And then again, we're talking about a series that had very little published stuff. It wasn't like you could go and pull from hours of DVD commentaries.
Oh yeah.
It just didn't exist. Like, who ever heard from Danny Steinman? Or
Yeah.
there wasn't anything there. So yeah, so so right away there was, like, again, that's the problem, is we only had one repeat director, who was Steve Miner. So right away, 10 directors. My list, I had 10 automatic, yeah, people I definitely want. And then yeah, I wanted each screenwriter, and then I wanted at least, I wanted the final girls. So I definitely, like, I'm like Amy Steele, and I'm like, oh my God, I guess the people who I'd be crushed by would have been like Amy Steele and Adrian King. Um, Let me think who else. I mean, I knew Kane. I felt like Kane Hunter would do it. So like some people I knew, I think, would do it. Um, Sean Cunningham was hard because I'm like, oh my God, and then he was kind of hesitant. And then there's people like I knew people would be curious about, like Kristen Glover and Kevin Bacon, so I really wanted them. I mean, personally, it's not like I was personally attached to Kevin Bacon or anything, but like, because I'm like, oh my God, it'd be so awesome to have his name, on there, and he's never talked, So yeah, but yeah, I apologize. It was about 30 people that were on my must-have list. So yeah, it was tough.
Well, what were some of the roadblocks that you ran into while writing the book? Were there any of the Friday the 13th alum that you just couldn't track down, or
Sure,
ones
sure.
that just refused to talk about the series for whatever
Yeah.
reason?
It's always, even the ones that, okay, there's, more minor characters or people, um, you're still just kind of disappointed because, the book's gonna be great without it. You can't put everyone in there. It still sucks when someone says no. Um, the hardest part was there's really no social media like now. So, and a lot of people back then didn't have email. I mean, this again, you're talking 15 years ago. So,
Mm.
um, sometimes you had to call people. So that was hard. It was terrifying. Like, I remember calling Amy Steele, and I didn't know they gave me her home number. I thought it was going to be her agent, so I literally call, and then Amy Steele answers the phone, and I'm sounding like an idiot. I'm like, I'm talking to Amy Steele. I'm not prepared because I wasn't expecting it. Or like one time I sent a fax to who I thought was Kimberly Beck's like business, and it turned out to be her home fax. So I'm watching, literally, I'm having an American Idol party. So I'm so dated here. Um, and the phone rings and it says, I back in call ID, we're talking landlines. It says Kimberly Beck. I'm like, oh my God, I'm having a party and Kimberly Beck's calling me. And she's like, I really can only talk right now. I'm like, oh my, I'm so sorry. I don't know what to do. Like it was that kind of really crazy shit. And you're like, and then you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like I remember thinking, okay, if I was 10 years old, I would never have thought in a million years that I'd be getting a call from Kimberly Beck at my home. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was all mixed together. And, but in terms of not getting, I mean, there's just a few people who, for whatever reason, are just don't want to be associated with it. And it's always weird. It's always random people. Like you never know the personal stories, but some people were kind of religious or just never explained it. Just sorry, no. Like I won't do that. And I don't know why. They don't explain. They just give you a flat no. Honestly, a couple people told me that they hesitated because their career didn't go the way they wanted, and like one actor told me off the record that he gets nauseous when he sees himself in film because it's just so disappointing to him the way things went.
Mm.
And he hasn't. So I can understand. There's a lot of personal reasons. Um, some people did nudity or, one actress, her name's Michelle Clooney. She was in Jason Goes to Hell. She was the one in the camper that gets split in half.
Mm-hmm.
She went on to a pretty notable career. She was in Queer as Folk, the TV show. She did stuff, Canadian actress, but she wrote back saying that she just feels it's too violent and she's not proud of it and didn't feel like it's a good representation. And so she didn't want to associate herself anymore with something like that. So that happens sometimes. Um, uh, Renee Jones is another one. She just spiritually is not in that place and doesn't like dark things and didn't want to talk about it. And so you never know. So
Were there any unscrupulous links that you went to secure an interview that you can discuss that made?
no. It
Okay.
was always, you just ask people. Like I remember asking, like I couldn't. This is before Adrienne King reemerged because she supposedly disappeared for a while. So I talked to Joe Zito, who turned out to know her very well, and he said, "Well, I'll give her a call." So he convinced her. Things like that. You ask people to help out. But my feeling is if someone doesn't talk about it, there's no use because you're not going to get a good interview anyway. You're gonna,
Mm-hmm.
if someone's mad and angry and they're being forced somehow to do an interview, it's not going to be good. So,
Yeah.
what I mean, they don't want to do it. But at a certain point, when you have 200 interviews, I'm like, the world's going to survive because the fans are still going to be okay that Rachel Howard didn't agree to an interview. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Of course, you want to hear from everybody, but again, you can't interview every last person anyway. Like some people were just like crazy. Walt Gorney, who played Crazy Ralph, unfortunately, he was ill and Alzheimer's.
Mm.
His wife or family member was really nice and just said he wouldn't be able to speak to you. That's just that's too. Of course, I'd love to hear from him. He's deceased now. But like Lori Bartram, she was very religious. Pretty much born again, and hugged her father, and that's the kind of thing. You got to respect it too. Like you can't. I don't know. I don't feel good as a person if I'm berating people for not agreeing to talk to me.
Right.
But that's just the way of the world. You can't expect any movie with hundreds of people in that everyone's gonna talk to you. Just
Yeah.
not in the cards.
Now, didn't you get into a press junket for a Kevin Bacon movie and
Oh
then
yeah.
just start asking him
Oh,
questions only about Friday the 13th?
I guess that's unscripted. Okay, so I used to do, because I did my websites, I would do a lot of press junkets for movies. If you know what a press junket is, it's like, they promoting the movie, so the cast goes to a hotel, usually Four Seasons here in Hollywood, and reporters come and there's tables and you sit around and sometimes you get one-on-ones and they kind of do the round, so you get like 15 minutes with each person. And so Kevin Bacon was doing I emailed or wrote his agent and they were kind of hemming and hawing and it just, you kind of getting brushed off without really getting brushed off. Um, so I kind of was like, uh-oh. So I called a friend of mine and I said, well, he's in a movie called Hollow Man. They're doing a press junket. Can you get me into the junket? He said, okay. I swear to God, I said, oh, I'm also, I'd like to ask, because it's a horror movie and question my friend. So yeah, fine. So I got the interview and I'm doing Hollow Man. And then I started going to Friday the 13th. And after about 6 minutes, I could tell his face was like, why does he keep at, it was clear that he was not told I was also doing Friday the 13th. And then I'm like, oh crap. So I kind of like went back and forth to try to get it. And then I kept bringing it back to Friday the 13th. So I got enough stuff. So to this day, I honestly don't know if he even puts two and two together, realizes what happened. So yeah, so that was a bit of an ambush, but I try my best. But and then what the other thing that happened is because the book was taking a long time, because I started on specs, I wasn't doing it full time at first. I had a job, and then I was able to do more time. Then the DVD started. Friday with Jason was whatever, and then Paramount started working on a box set, and they called me. We did some commentaries. So then it became a thing of, some people, Corey Feldman, for example, wanted. I'll be honest, two or three people wanted money, and I was looking at this as a journalistic enterprise. This was not promotion for a company or for Paramount or a studio.
Mm.
This was, a book. And I even talked to Tracy Savage, who used to be a reporter, from Part Three. She's like, you never pay. She's like, no, absolutely not. You never pay people for an interview because then you're getting a performance, or you're paying their agent or whatever. So Corey Feldman, I'll say he wanted, or his agent at least wanted money. And I'm like, I'm sorry, we don't pay. So, however, because they then got him for the DVD, I was able to come down, actually prepare all the questions. So I was able to get I was able to get the full transcripts of all the material for the Paramount stuff that we could use then in the book. So we kind of worked together. So I helped them out. A little known story. We actually met, me and a couple other people from Crystal Lake Entertainment, when Paramount was doing the box set, the first one, from Crystal Lake Manhattan one.
Mm-hmm.
And they were showing us stuff. Like, this is the first time I got to see the deleted TV scenes for Final Chapter and stuff. And it was all really nice. And then they show us the menus for the thing. And all of a sudden we see the Jason X mask come flying out of the screen. And then the menu starts. And this was for the Paramount. This was only the Paramount movies. And I'm like, that's the mask from Jason X. And literally no one at Paramount, because again, you start realizing these are people that don't know these movies. They had no idea they used the wrong mask. And literally, this is like weeks before it's coming out. They can't repress it. So now if you watch the original menus, you'll see that it starts with like the camera already into the eye of the mask, because they had to zoom in closer because they didn't have time to reshoot the mask. So,
Wow.
But they were there for that. So then, this kind of, so some stuff I got, through the help of the studios some of these people might not have done it if they weren't paid by the studio to appear in DVD extras. So, but I don't think that's unscrupulous, but I don't know if I should be saying this, I might get sued, but so some of the material did come from full unedited transcripts of stuff shot for the DVDs, but I would say about 90% of the interviews I did solely for the book and were not seen elsewhere. And sometimes they just say stuff better. Like, there were sometimes I would use, like, Kane Hodder, I think, did all the commentaries, or I think Tom McLaughlin has done like 2 different commentaries for Jason Lives. And he gave me an interview, and sometimes people would say something better on the commentary, so I would pull that transcript version because it just sounded better or read better. So sometimes some stuff was mismatched together, but you always want to do as much stuff on your own to get stuff on your own. Because 2 people, when I discovered this, was when they do stuff for a studio or they're being on camera, they do act different. You can tend to get people to open up more, I find, if you're just doing a print interview. Like, if I met someone at lunch, you could ramble on and they might tell you more, fun detail, gossipy stuff,
Right.
then they're going to say when the camera's looking at them, they know they're going to be on film. People tend to act different.
Or just get a few drinks in them.
Exactly that too. Well, I can tell you a couple